Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of Beyond the Wires, a show where I talk to other creators in the same sort of field and different fields as well eventually down the line here. But yeah, today I got a chance to sit down with one of my favorite smaller creators at the moment, Isyourguy, who currently, you mainly just have the one video currently, but ever since I saw it, I've particularly liked your style, and I think it helps that it's kind of I wouldn't say it's like my style, but it's that type of vibe that I'm very much into, you know? You have a very distinct style right off the bat. But why don't we start with you just introducing yourself? People already know who I am, or at least I hope they do if they found this. But I'm your host, Demenza, and this is my guest, Isyourguy.
Yeah, g'day. I'm Isyourguy, or Ig for short, if you like. I'm a freelance composer, freelance game developer, and I guess now a YouTuber. Having released one video, but it is a very long video.
It's a very long, very in-depth video.
That I spent like way too much time on.
Yeah, I mean, it shows. It definitely shows. It goes, and I think it gives a very broad kind of idea, like the style you're going for, the themes you're going to cover, all that stuff. Like, it's very good as a starting video, I'll say that. It definitely left an impression on me, and I'm hoping, part of this entire deal is kind of to bring a spotlight down to people who might need it. And that sometimes isn't the case. My last guest I had was Coffee, a good friend of mine, good friend of the channel, but they are, I'd say compared to them, I am a small ant. But for once, I feel like I actually do have an ability to do some good here, and just say your stuff's real good, and everybody should check that shit out. But
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I actually rewatched the Lane video ahead of this to write some of the questions and stuff like that. But so that's sort of the basic introduction. But some stuff I kind of wanted to ask you, and also now that you mentioned it, you mentioned also being sort of a freelance game developer and having worked on that stuff before. Do you have any particular projects that you've worked on, or any big projects that you've kind of finished in regards to that?
I've sort of drifted out of that world in the last couple of years. I've been working in like in normie job land, doing like tech. But
same.
I'm coming back out of that space right now and worming my way back into game development. But like prior to tech, I was sort of very much in the indie space doing game jams and the like. Probably the one that people would most recognize me for is a little game that I worked on with a guy called Daniel Linson, or Managor, and the game's called Roguelite, and it was for like a Game Boy themed game jam eons ago, and I did the music and sound effects for that. It was a very, very long time ago, but yeah, I'm sort of working to get back into game development at the moment, and there's a couple of things I'm working on that I don't want to really get too deep into.
Yeah,
just in case they don't pan out.
Yeah, you gotta make sure it's actually something solid first. That's good. That's cool though. I feel like I've heard that name before. I used to kind of pay attention to game jam circles and stuff more. I'm trying to again, because I'm one of them weirdos who likes to just crawl around on like itch.io and just find like 10-minute experiences that are fun. Eventually I'd like to
really
do
good
something and
stuff
cover. Yeah. I mean, it's where you get a bunch of early developers that have a lot of creativity, and I think it's something that I particularly like, and that's kind of the stuff that I look for, and that's the stuff I try to cover, stuff that has such a strong personality behind it, or such a strong style, even if it's not like the most polished thing on earth. I think you can still like shine, and itch is like perfect for that.
Yeah, and it's the type of space where you can really like see a creator's voice in the work, right? Like, because oftentimes like there's very little barrier to entry to putting stuff on itch on like platforms like Steam and the like, right? Like you literally create an itch page and upload it. And you can really see, like, oftentimes these are made by like one or two people, and you can just really see their like what drives them, like in the actual work itself. It's really good.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite little things for just visiting every once in a while and kind of pulling games on it. One of these days I kind of want to just like grab a bunch and showcase it off there, which is kind of sort of what I did with my most recent video. But yeah, that's cool that you have that background. That's like a particular background that's like that. Truthfully, if I wasn't doing video stuff, that's probably what I would be doing. I did try to like sit down and learn Unity, and I have the basics, but it's literally right now a matter of time between work, between making videos, between everything else. It's like I can't find time to also make a game. But one day,
we're like spoiled for choice in sort of like creative pursuits these days, right? Like if someone wants to like make music, then there's so many like tools available online for free that they can just use to make it. If they want to make like 3D animation, then they can just like go on YouTube, find tutorials, and there's tools that will let them do that stuff for free. It's like we're living in a time where people always talk about like, we're living in a time where creativity has been kind of democratized, and I think that's true to a certain extent, not true in others, but like, yeah, it's honestly wild compared to like maybe 50 years ago, where if you wanted to learn something, you kind of had to know someone who knew it.
Yeah, and I think I definitely agree with that, because it's like even in just like my channels and stuff, me and you have talked back and forth, but like you've helped me out or been like, hey, here's this. I think you were the one who taught me tucking on audio, which I didn't even know about before then, because I've never taken an actual official ducking. Yes,
tucking is something else.
You are right. Completely separated from audio work, but
good skill to learn though.
It is. It can come in handy. You never know when you'll need it. But yeah, you taught me stuff like that, and I've kind of just picked stuff up piecemeal from other creators. Definitely, like it's so much easier to have a community where you can just kind of talk to people and be like, how do I make shit? Which is, that's part of why I like the idea of sitting down with other creators and just shooting the shit like this, because it's nice to talk about like, hey, here's the behind the scenes, here's the work that goes into this, here's the like 70 plus hours of work that we put in on our back end for an hour-long video that people watch and go, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think the wildest part is that, like, from the outside, I know that, like, from my perspective at least, from the outside, it was like, oh, the really hard part's going to be like video editing, the really hard part's going to be like assembling all the footage and stuff. And I think that, like, actually the really hard part is the thing that you don't expect, which is like coming up with an idea that you feel is like, one, worth getting out there, and then two, like getting that idea into a state that it like accurately reflects like what you want to say. And as much as like we talk about all these tools and techniques, I think like being able to create something that is at least resembles what you want to get across in some way, that's probably, I think, the hardest thing.
Yes. So yeah, I just recently scrapped a script actually, because I spent like pretty much, the better part of a month kind of going back to it, workshopping it, revisiting it, poking at it again and again and again, and like no matter what I did, I just wasn't happy with it. And at some point I was just like, I'm just gonna toss this out, start fresh, go with something else. And that's helped me a ton. But yeah, the writing process is one of the things that is very easy to struggle with, which actually one of the things I actually like to ask people here is what's the hardest part for you? Would you say that's kind of the hardest part in the whole experience of putting together a video? Just actually coming up with
I think
the writing?
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. And it's like, it's not even like, like getting the words on the page, because like I can pontificate with the best of them. I can come up with like loads of bullshit to just throw out there. But it's like at the end of the day, like I read through it, I'm like, this is just like incoherent. Like, what point am I trying to make here? Like, I've rambled off in a different direction here, and it just like it's totally disconnected from the thrust of the actual work. And like the hard part, I think, is like shaping the script, I guess, is the way I would describe it. Like trying to like come up with something that is like punchy in the areas that it needs to be, that sort of like takes the viewer or the listener or the audience on the sort of the right emotional arc that I want to take them on.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. I feel like I think it was my friend Thor High Heels. I don't know if you have ever seen his stuff, but he's another friend of mine. But he specifically mentioned his method, which was if you don't get like your script written in a single sitting, the longer it sits there, the harder it becomes to write. Because you start to like second guess yourself, you start to look back at earlier stuff, and you just lose the flow of that mindset you were in when you first started writing it. So it can create this really like disjointed sort of script that doesn't all flow together, or like that you start to second guess and you start to go, okay, but I don't like this part, maybe I should rewrite it. And like the longer you kind of sit there and second guess your work, the more you're gonna sit there and do endless rewrites, or just kind of get in your head about it, which is the kind of the problem that I have. You know, the longer I sit on something, the more I'm like, I don't know if I like this, I think it might not be good, I don't know if anybody will enjoy it. That's kind of like one of the harder parts for me, I think.
That is definitely true. And like, I don't think I could adapt that fully for my process. But
yeah,
like,
it's a bit harder when you're making such intricate videos.
Well, and yeah, it's kind of hard because I'm like sourcing stuff and like reading different like reading scientific papers. Like for this next one, I've been reading like Tesla crash data.
Huh. All right. That's interesting for whatever that topic is going to be.
And yeah, just to clarify, it's a anime YouTube video. I'm reading Tesla crash data, so yeah, it's fun.
I can't. What anime is that connected to? Is it Space Brothers, the hit 100-episode anime that's really good? More people should watch.
No, it's not, and I don't mind spoiling it. It's a 6-episode OVA that came out in 2000 called X Driver, and the series is about 3 kids who drive like regular cars in a world where like every other car is self-driving, and when the self-driving cars like go rogue and start like causing accidents and stuff, they use their normal cars to like take them down.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like very interesting. Fair enough. That makes sense for looking into that, doing your research into the Musk boy. But well, sweet. Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you because you mentioned your research here and you're reading scientific papers and stuff about crashes over here collecting data, but I was gonna specifically say, in the Lane video, there are like specific moments of particularly well-researched stuff in regards to like just the culture and like cults in the culture and stuff that would have been in that current sort of area around the airing of like Lane and creating it and stuff like that. And I wanted to kind of, I guess, ask what that process is, what your research process is, which you already kind of went into a little bit, but...
Sure, yeah. So, it's not a very sort of like nice answer, because there's no sort of like nice trick to it, but it's like, you gotta kind of like read a lot of books. And I think it's like, I guess my process would start with like, well, first I kind of have to come up with the core of the idea, right? I don't like watch a show and then go, what can I read onto this show, and like what can I make a video about, kind of thing. I'm probably inefficient in that way, right? Where I'm waiting to be struck with an idea. So when I was watching, I watched Serial Experiments Lane, and then I rewatched it, and then I rewatched it like back to back a bunch of times. And I was like kind of walking around my apartment. This was like during like lockdowns, COVID lockdowns in Melbourne, Australia. And I was like in my apartment and just thinking about this like show, and I'd been following for quite a while the whole sort of like COVID conspiracy, following the whole like QAnon stuff.
Yeah,
and I've been well aware of that stuff. Yeah, I've been well aware of that stuff for a while, and it sort of like jumped out at me just the way that the show portrays Lane and some of the other characters and some of the other groups in the show. I was like, feels very, very spot on. And while I was writing the script, that was when the creator of the show's blog became sort of public, and he was like writing all of this COVID conspiracy stuff himself. And I was like, oh crap, I have to edit the script. Like, I have to work this in. But like, yeah, so the research process, I guess, is sort of like one, trying to be aware of those sort of things. I can't like, if I'm not aware of like, if I had no idea about self-driving cars, I had no idea what they were. I had no idea of like what Tesla was doing and all that stuff. Then me watching something like X-Driver, which is about self-driving cars, it's not going to jump out at me. Like that idea. So I'm not going to be making a video about it. But in the case of like, I've been following that stuff and being in the tech sphere and being a little bit of a Luddite in that regard, I guess. And having followed that stuff for a while, I'd already had a pretty good like jumping off point. As far as actual like going out there and getting resources, it's, you know, following writers in that space and leveraging like Google Scholar, for example, which will, you know, it's a search engine that lets you search through like archives of scientific papers, looking through stuff like JSTOR and all of the regular academic like paper portals, and it's all very like boring.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's like lots of like reading abstracts and being like, I don't think this is about what I want to, like what I'm talking about. I think this is about a different thing.
Yeah, for, you know, 99% of the stuff is just junk, and then you find the 1% that's like, oh, this relates.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing there is like, I have to be careful to a degree. I'm not doing science, right? Thankfully,
yeah.
But like I do have to be thoughtful, right? Because I've come up with an argument, or I've come up with a read of the show, an idea of how this stuff works in the show, and I need to make sure that like, if I read a paper that says, hey, this isn't how we think about this stuff anymore, this isn't how the field like looks at this stuff, and it's not accurate, I have to be like, oh well, I guess I was off base there. Like, I'm not, you know, my initial knowledge, or maybe a paper I'd read from like, you know, early 2000s or even the 90s isn't really up to date anymore. So
yeah.
Unfortunately, the answer is like, yeah, you just gotta do a lot of reading.
It's also like, especially with the Lane video in regards to some of the research topics in the cultural sphere of the time in the 90s, when stuff like Lane was coming out and Evangelion and all these things that did in some degree serve as criticism to these cults that were happening there. Like, we don't have that cultural understanding of being in that region in that exact time for the most part. You know,
yeah,
it's not going to
absolutely.
be the same as somebody who's local and knows that stuff intricately. Like, you know, like it, no matter what, that's kind of the case here. Like, I've known to a degree that some of that stuff existed, but your video, I think, made me realize like, oh, okay, this was much more of a thing at the time, which explains why some of the media was so like that at the time, why there was such this fascination of like cultic imagery and stuff in a lot of the media that came out around them, serving as sort of criticism or just to have it be there in the background otherwise, because it was such an ingrained part of the culture. Like it kind of clicked that it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think
with Lane.
I think it would be kind of similar to like perhaps not at the same scale, right? But I think it would be kind of similar to something like 9/11, right? Something like the London bombings. I think that was in the mid 2000s, right? Like it may not perhaps be as resonant of a thing to someone who wasn't in that country at the time to see not only the direct, like the actual event at the time, but the way that society reacted to it. And that was something that I was reading about, and I bring it up a couple of times during the video, which is like the way that people sort of reacted to the thing itself rather than like going through the details of the events.
Well, that's the thing that's often forgotten, with major events.
There's one thing that I will always remember from that video. I haven't actually watched the video since I uploaded it. I've tried to I've tried to move on. But there's one thing that I will always remember from the script, which is the quote from the schoolgirl who was like, "Oh, I get on my train, and then I catch it with my friends or whatever to go to school or whatever, and then like there's signs up saying, well, look out for suspicious activity because of this sarin gas attack, right? Look out for suspicious activity," and everyone knew who did it. And then she would get off at a different station, and people who were part of like the group who was responsible for it, were like handing out pamphlets. And it must be such a bizarre feeling to like know that like, oh, okay, this group is kind of responsible for this attack, but also like there's a representative of that group handing out pamphlets at the station. It's like it must feel so alien and strange to be in that moment where like there's this, it feels like a disconnect between these two facts of reality, right, that are happening. So that culturally is hard to even imagine, because it's just so different and separated from anything that anything that even in the West you would go through. People who would do those kind of very public attacks, and then it's just the next day there they are on the street, or even the same day there they are on the street completely acting normal. And it's just like it's the disconnect of seeing the actions that can be done by that group versus them basically putting on a public face. And there's just tons of stuff that it's hard to get as intricately as like a culture at the time. I think we see a lot of it with Japan in particular, because obviously manga and anime are so prevalent these days, but like every culture has these events that occur that are like just so locally ingrained that it's like, oh yeah, you know about this event or whatever, or this very intricate cultural attack or whatever thing has happened culturally, right? For America, I mean, we have a whole bunch of shit, but one of the things that is uniquely American, and I guess it has spread kind of all over at this point, but the QAnon shit was something that did sort of rise up here, and the way our news media culture works, the way our politics work, have kind of served as the ideal ground for that stuff. So it's like, yeah, we kind of have an intricate understanding of like how Fox News is slowly dissolving the brains of our parents or our elders and stuff like that. Whereas other cultures might not understand to the degree that like it's kind of an issue. And I think to a certain extent, like so the sarin gas attacks happened in the 90s, and I think we were like, at least compared to now, we were a little bit more sort of disconnected culturally as countries.
Yeah, that's also true.
I think today, I think that's slightly different now. I think that like when something like QAnon can spread to like any country in the world as quickly as it has, even though it has all the hallmarks of like a uniquely American thing, it's been sort of adapted and embedded into the cultures where it's taken root. And then even something like, not talking about like a conspiracy or whatever, right? If we're talking about like a shared cultural event that has that's going to have a significant impact on us going forward, is the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
It's and it's interesting in that there will be aspects of this thing that will be shared with other countries and other cultures, other than our own respective cultures. But like this will to a degree, I think, be a shared experience, and we will to a certain degree be able to relate, right? Like that time where we all were in lockdown, right? And I think that like to varying degrees, we will have that kind of shared anxiety, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, to a degree, it's also gonna get to the point where it's, you know, the same thing 9/11 kind of was here, where it's like the people that were born after it have a very different understanding of the world, have a very different viewpoint of the world than those who might have been born during it or were old enough to experience such an event. Like the pandemic is one of those things that's just like, yeah, I wonder how this is going to be for the kids who grow up and they're like, yeah, I just grew up with this. This is the normal at the time.
Yeah.
But
and there's films that have been made, right? Like that. So there's a film that was made. I haven't seen it yet. I really want to. Called Host, and it's I think 40 something minutes long. And it's all takes place through a Zoom call. It's a horror film. And it's 40 something minutes long because that's how long a free Zoom call was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and everyone during the early lockdowns was everyone was getting on these free Zoom sessions and just like having to restart these like 40-minute Zoom sessions every time because it would just cut the session after 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, you know,
so
I remember
think,
that being
like 20, 30 years from now, people are going to look at this film and be like, oh yeah, you know, it's 40 minutes because of that's how long a Zoom call was, and there was this pandemic that everyone was on, and we had to like reiterate and recontextualize the sort of the culture at the time.
Yeah, that's definitely that's a trip to think about. In 20 plus years, people are gonna look back at our media and be like, oh, why is this the way it is? Oh, looking into all this stuff that was happening in the time, that sort of explains it. God, I haven't even considered that.
Why did everyone become like weird little freaks and perverts? And
why did everybody become weird little goblins after 2020? What happened? But
exactly.
So your video right now that you put out was basically about an hour long, but I wanted to ask you, first off, who are some of the biggest influences for your stuff? The unique style you have in particular is something that, I mean, obviously that appeals to me, but I'm always interested to see like where people kind of got that original spark from, or like what influences have kind of worked their way into their stuff.
Wow. I should have known this question was going. I think this is quite a tough question.
There's never like a single straight answer as well. So like don't feel bad if you can't point to like exactly one source or whatever.
Do you mean like the sort of why I made the video the way I did? Like I mean in the particular. So yeah, a bit. Or like why I started making videos.
I feel like they're kind of one and the same, honestly. I guess those are probably two separate things. So like first off, I guess I'm interested in figuring out like why people got into this type of work, and then I'm also kind of interested in like the influences that go into like making the channel the way it is. So for me, like a lot of the style and the visuals that I shoot for are kind of an amalgamation of like people that have made really cool stuff that I liked in the past, and also just me picking stuff that I think looks cool and fits with my stuff. But yeah, I guess I'm kind of always interested in kind of figuring out like what the influences are that got a person started in stuff and also just helped to influence their style. I feel like most of the time those two things kind of blend together, you know? Whoever got you to be like, I'm gonna sit down and make a video, that person's style, I feel like, to some degree, often kind of trickles in, you know?
I think maybe in my case, they're two separate things.
Okay.
Because there wasn't a person or a persons who like, I thought I want to do that. I want to do what they do. I want to do that as well because I've got things to say. I started doing my script after watching Lane because immediately after watching it, I started to like. I went, oh well, I'm gonna go see if other people are talking about this and what they're saying. And I couldn't really find much. Right, there was people talking about like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, it's you know. It's like we're talking about like heaps of philosophy stuff, and I didn't go to like I didn't study book learning. I didn't do like philosophy or whatever. I didn't know that crap. No offense to people who do know that crap. Very cool.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's very nice that people can be that smart. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them.
So there's people who are talking about it in that way, right? And they talk about, oh, it's, you know, if you read this book, it's very low, it's very smart, it's very clever, and talking about like all these different like deity stuff. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what this is. And then I found some stuff where people were like, oh, this is like the most red-pilled anime. And I'm like, what are you talking about? No. What do you mean, red pill? That's so interesting. And then I found some other videos that were just like, oh, like, you know, Lane's so, oh, it's so trippy. It's so weird. Oh, and I'm like, I guess, but like, what, you want to unpack that a bit more? Like, it's this sort of like very shallow kind of like reading of it, just being it's good, it's so trippy, it's so weird kind of thing,
yeah,
and not really trying to engage with it beyond that. I'm like, oh well, I guess I have to do this now.
Yeah, so you basically saw a void there, and wanted to make something that kind of showcased that stuff off, or talked about.
And I think there are other creators that do that sort of stuff, that approach media in a more sort of like thoughtful way, because in the anime YouTube space, there is like good content is few and far between. Like there are very few sort of shining lights out there. There is a lot of like I'm happy to say it because I don't consider myself in any way part of AniTube or whatever. There's a lot of crap out there.
Oh yeah,
a lot of crap.
Yeah, I mean there is quite a lot of people that I think just kind of for whatever reason, anime in particular has a very there's a very thin line between people who like actively want to engage and watch this stuff and people who are like weird. There's like a weird amount of people who are like internet goblins that are into anime and are like just horribly sexist or racist. The cross between the 4chan type and anime fans is like weirdly prevalent, and I kind of had the issue ages back. You know, you'd get figures like Digi and stuff who it's just like, yeah, you're like a light breeze away from just being a full-on horrible like 4chan goblin. I'm good. I want to avoid that. It wasn't until like Hazel, a friend of the channel as well, and my friend Coffee, who I had here to interview first, they both make particularly queer-focused anime videos, and I think that's a very unique way to come at it, because it's like for that community, that really isn't as prevalent as it maybe should be, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And both Coffee and Hazel are both creators that I think are doing some great stuff in the space. I think that the overwhelming majority of content that I saw out there was like literally just people like recapping the plot of the show and then saying like, this is so good. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like it.
And not having any discussion.
Why do you like it? Like what makes it so? It's clear that they're passionate about it, right? And I don't know if it's like they don't have the language to express why they're passionate about it. I think that like there's that sort of meme from high school that's like when you're studying like a work in like English class or whatever, and the teacher says like, oh, the author has written this scene and the curtains are blue, but what does it mean that the curtains are blue? And there's this meme that's like, oh, maybe they just wanted the curtains to be blue. Did you ever think about this? And yeah, maybe they did just want the curtains to be blue. Why would they want that? Like, or even like, okay, who cares that they wanted the curtains to be blue? I don't care about that. What does it mean in the work that the curtains are blue? And I think that meme, that pushback from high school, I think had to a degree become ingrained in the way that we like view media. I think I definitely grew up with that attitude, and I think over time I had it sort of wrung out of me by my friends and to a certain degree myself as well, looking at like other people online and seeing the dark reflection of what you could be and going, oh, I don't know if I like where maybe I'm heading.
Yeah, I think I've always just referred to it as the CinemaSinsfication of criticism, which is slowly but surely people criticizing or talking about any art as like a piece of art has slowly been kind of whittled away online. A lot of spaces want to just talk about things on a very surface level, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but there's plenty of people who will like, criticize or dogpile on a piece of art because they don't like some weird particular aspect of it. Particularly, I feel like a lot with anime in particular, or games, you get the crowd that's like, if so much as like a single pixel is changed on a model, a bunch of people come out of nowhere to get really upset about it. You'll change
because they're products, right?
Yeah.
They're media and they're art, right? But when you view those things as a product, then that brings a lot of baggage with it.
Yeah.
A band I've liked for some time has recently come out with a new album. The band's called the Mars Volta. They've been on and off sort of since another band called At the Drive-In sort of broke up in 2002 or whenever that was. And they've been this amazing group of artists that have made the most amazing stuff. And they recently put out a new album, and they've done a press tour and said like, talked to some journalists online and whatever, and said like, this new album it's different. It's very different. And we have a message for the people who think that's bad. The message is, fuck you. We like, if you don't think that like, if you like Mars Volta, if you like what we do, then like, you have to respect the fact that we change. And I think that what people view from products is things like reliability, dependability, and that like change like is in art is amazing, in a creator is fantastic, right? But in a product, it's not something that you want in a product. And I think that if we view media as product, then that's why that sort of this is different to what I envision, 1-star review kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, especially with the way a lot of media is these days. It's so wild to think that there was a time at this point before streaming when you would have to actually catch a TV at the exact time you wanted to watch a show, Because now everything's just products on the shelf for you to consume. Somebody once described it as because they, Netflix and stuff has been doing all these live action adaptations, and somebody hit me with the realization of like Netflix, HBO Max, none of them care about you actually watching the shows. You just need to keep paying the subscription, and you just need to know that there's products on the shelf at all times. That's all it is anymore. It's just a big superstore of products on the shelves that is so large you can't possibly consume everything. So you just kind of have to keep up in that subscription on the off chance that something good might come around these days. And it sucks because it sort of you don't get many shows that are willing to take huge risks anymore. It feels like those don't really get funded as often, unless it's by like crowdsourcing or like some random benevolent third party shows up that is like, yeah, I'll give you money to make your weird shit. Sure, why not?
Yeah, and I think that there's a tension, and to a degree, there's always been a tension there, just in varying forms between the work and like the artist and how it's being funded, right? Even going back to like early Hollywood, right, where like there's films being made, but like they're being bankrolled. Like the money needs to come from somewhere because film's becoming very expensive to make. And even now, right, where to make a film, if you want to make a film, you're either doing it like indie style and doing it as cheaply as possible and like getting friends together and like, doing whatever you can, or you are like making the next Marvel movie or whatever, and you're getting like massive tax breaks because you're filming in Vancouver or filming in Georgia or something, and then when the movie gets made, you write it off, even though you made a massive profit and you made hundreds of millions of dollars. You write it off as a loss next tax season because that's how you make money. And like that's just the sort of there's this tension there, even when there's that massive Hollywood type blockbuster film or whatever. There's people there who want to make art. Yeah. And there's a studio there who wants to make like money and wants to like write this thing off as a loss so that they can do some dodgy tax stuff. Like those two like perspectives are at odds. And I mean, this is all to say that like mass sort of consumerist mass culture like isn't necessarily bad, right? Like you can watch a Marvel, like they're not my cup of tea, but like you can watch a Marvel movie and you can get something out of it, right? Because there's people making this thing, and because you're in a certain time period, in a certain culture, and this thing has a resonance with you.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it's like important to remember that like even though everything's bad and horrible and shit, you can still get something out of those ultimately heavily corporatized experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always that nice back and forth, but I think for the most part, people that sort of are on the edge like us, we get to kind of just make whatever the hell. There ain't no money in this yet. All art is great as money in it for me. It's great. There's no money. There's no. I mean, in fairness, I would sell out instantly if Raid gave me some money, kicked some money my way.
Who's your favorite Raid Shadow Legends hero?
I don't know.
Heroes? I don't know.
I don't know anything about Raid Shadow Legends, unfortunately.
Cut this section. If you get a raid spot, cut this.
Yeah, I'll edit it back into. I'll just do like a voiceover that says I love Raid Shadow Legends. It's my favorite game. But Yeah,
and that's the thing, right? Like, there's so many YouTube creators who do this stuff, who get like those sort of sponsorships, right? And who are like, oh, time to break for our sponsor, Better Health or whatever. Like, they're doing this stuff, right? And like, it's not. I could never do it. I just couldn't. But like, I'm not going to begrudge someone who is doing it. Like, on a personal level, like, chase that bag, get that bag, get that bill paid, pay rent. Like, you got to do it.
It's.
I'd rather someone be comfortable and they have like a little three minute section in their video of cringe or whatever. Doesn't matter. They get paid for it. So long as they do get paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's sort of art's always been in a weird, complicated space like that. I feel like no matter what, there's always been a back and forth of like, what's the morality of profiting off of making art and stuff and whatever. But yeah.
And I think the thing to remember is that at a personal level, at an individual level, like my thinking is that I can't judge someone for like needing to pay rent. Like,
oh yeah,
if I was like, I'm just like weird and broken in such a way that like, for me to do that, like, I get an intense physical reaction and it makes my
much the
blood
same.
evaporate. Like, I can't do it.
I feel that I'm much the same way, as much as I joke about being a sellout. It's we live in a complicated world, unfortunately. But I did notice, so on your project, on the Lane video, there were quite a few people that sort of helped you assist with that process. And I wanted to kind of ask, I guess, what it was like to kind of collab with, or not, I guess collab, but, you know, work with multiple people on a thing, have people doing the script checking and all that. Do you feel like it was, you know, helpful to the process of actually getting something out for you? Because I've been considering something along those lines for a while, but I'm always hesitant because I'm like, I know if anybody else touches this but me, I won't be happy.
Yeah. So we've talked about this to a degree before, and we actually kind of touched on like earlier when I said that the writing is the hardest part for me. Like, everyone involved with this, other than myself, was looking at the writing. If they made like suggestions like, oh, maybe you should change the visuals here, I would kindly tell them to eat shit. No one, thankfully, no one said anything about the music, because I would have.
Oh yeah, I should also say, yeah, you made your own music for that video as well, which was very. Was that just all done by yourself only?
Yeah, that's all me. That's my first love is music making, and I made a commitment to myself that if I do YouTube videos, I have to provide an original score to each one.
That's a very bold promise to make yourself at the top.
I only have one video. So
you only got one so far, which.
But there's like 50 or 60 minutes of music or something in there. That was like,
yeah, it's
that was really fun to make.
Nice little background tracks that I really enjoyed. But yeah, I know. Yeah, there was like I found it interesting when the credits rolled, because it was like you had script readers, you had proofreaders and checkers and stuff. You had like a bunch of people that sort of helped you along there, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. It's like a little group effort, kind of, in a way, and I find that very interesting as like a thing a method to go through and make this stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I think that probably to again tie back to what I mentioned earlier about writing being the hardest part. That was the thing that I was always sort of going to need some assistance with, right? Like, or at least welcome some assistance with. If only because, like, as I said before, right? Like, how the issue isn't the choice of words or anything like that. The issue is like, am I doing the best thing I can to make sure my point comes across? And what I did was I sat down with my a friend of mine and a writer, narrative designer, editor, Damon Reese, who I would not do this work for cheap. And I sat down with them and had a discussion. Like, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, this is what the point I'm trying to get across. This is how I'm this is how I want to be heard at the very least, right? And they went away and they watched the entire series and read the entire script and came back with some notes. And ultimately there wasn't as many notes as I sort of suspected or thought there might be. They made some suggestions here and there, and ultimately it resulted in like changing the structure of the work and trying to make things flow better. But it was the main thing I wanted out of that was to have someone say like, you like, this is you. I read it and I understand what you're trying to do, and it comes across. And making some small tweaks to sort of further hone that. The other person who helped me out a great deal was my partner, who I didn't pay because
Oh yeah, there's some benefits there. You can always worse.
Yeah.
That's fair. At the moment, my
treats and snacks and doing chores.
Yeah, that's sort of how I pay my girlfriend.
I'll do the laundry for a week or whatever.
I more or less, like, my girlfriend basically will proofread my stuff for event every so often as well, and so I have that experience, but I don't have the how should I say it? I'm not brave enough to let another human being look at my work, I'm like intensely embarrassed of my own writing. To the point where I'm like, I can't let another human being see this stuff, except like maybe my girlfriend, because she understands the way my mind works and understands what I'm going for. Because everybody else, my biggest fear is like, I'll give somebody else something I've written for a video, and they'll be like, let's change this entire thing completely because none of this is good. And I always intensely fear, for whatever reason, that I guess anybody anyone normal who's not like a weird fucked up little goblin like me is gonna be intensely turned off by my stuff.
There's definitely a vulnerability there, right? Where like this is a document that's been sitting on your computer or whatever, and it's like you have an understanding that this is not the thing that's going to be released, right? This is a draft, or this is a work in progress, or whatever. So you don't necessarily consider it, like, while it's being created, as an accurate representation of what you're trying to get across. And to have someone else who perhaps you don't have a degree of trust, an existing relationship with, read that, it definitely does. It could feel very very like vulnerable. You could feel very vulnerable. I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean,
in my case, I knew my editor. I'm friends with them, so that is mitigated to some degree. They've seen me do more cringe things, so I was fine with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely understand it. I could definitely understand that. I think that it seems like there's I'm inventing a type of guy here who would say like, well, hang on, you're writing a script and you're making a video and then you're posting it publicly. Like, what could be more like, what could make you feel more vulnerable than that? And I think there is a kind of like a little bit of a conflict there, because I understand that to a degree. Like, I wouldn't want to publish the draft script for people to read, but also I'm making a full video and putting it out there. There's definitely a weird kind of like conflict. Maybe not a conflict. I don't know. I'm of two minds there, and I'm sort of they clash a little bit, right?
The way I feel on it, right, is like, when I can make the video and when I put a video out, I mean, yes, I am always nervous whenever I put a video out that's like, this one isn't good, nobody's gonna like this one. Like, twice now I've released a video and been like, this is my worst one yet, followed by it getting complete praise and people telling me this is the best one yet. So, fuck if I know anymore. But it's like, yeah, there is always that little bit of worry, but I always am more confident in my end vision. Like, when I put out a video, I can at least be like, alright, I've put in the time, I put in the effort, here's the video that I put out, this is the vision I had in my mind. But when you're showing somebody, like, a part of that, especially, like, a script, and they can't, like, see the finished product, like, they can't see the picture you have in your head, I think that's really hard to get across, like, the tone and the cuts you want to do and what you're thinking internally. Like, I try to make notes that are, like, cut away to this specific thing when I say this or whatever. But it's like, even with that, that's not very helpful for somebody who isn't intricately familiar with the footage I have recorded, the game I'm covering, and like my own personality and all that stuff. And like even the tone of how I say something impacts and changes what it is compared to it on paper. So for paper, I mean, when it's like the draft, I feel like the reason I'm always so nervous about that is it's kind of like, it's kind of like being naked in front of somebody else. They get to see all the flaws and the weirdness of your draft or whatever, and they don't get to see the method behind the madness to the same degree. So it's a little bit hard to get that across, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Something that sort of like jumped to my mind while talking about this is, I uploaded the video and I tweeted about it, and then I was like, I don't want to engage with this. I don't want to see it. Right? Done. It's done. And then I watched some people like doing a live stream reaction to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was like, I forced myself to watch it because I was like, I need to know that people get it and people get what I'm trying to say. I'm like, because I'd spent so long on this thing. Like, I had a script in some early form of this thing already written, and then Hazel's Serial Experiments Lane video came out.
Oh no.
And I saw it pop up in my recommended, and this was before I'd never heard of Hazel, and this video popped up on my recommended thing, and I'm like, oh fuck it, like, I just bin the fucking script, I give up, like, this video is doing numbers, I'm fucking done. Like, and then I brought I was like, okay, I'll watch it, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, actually, this is different.
It's like a completely
different thing. Like,
take on the series, because it's more focused on the PS1 game as well.
Yeah, and I'd worked myself up into a frenzy, into a lather. I was so just raw and terrified. And even when I released it, I was like, oh my god, shaking. I'm like, what? Are people gonna get it? This is like an hour and 10-minute video or whatever. And I'm like, all right, I'll watch this. I have to watch it. And I'm watching it, and they're like quiet through the whole thing, except from little bits where they're like, oh shit, yeah, that's true, that's good, wow, ooh, wow. And those moments, I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. But the thing I noticed was that when I rendered the video, there were a bunch of visual glitches in the final render. I went, oh, okay, I'll fix these. I went and re-rendered the sections that were glitched, patched them in, rebuilt the video, and sent it and uploaded it.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that the version that I had uploaded hadn't fixed those visual glitches.
Oh no.
So I'd done all this extra work to re-render and fix like a couple of like dropped like weird frames or like some like bits where the visual effects weren't working properly, or an image came in later than something or other, and like all these like really tiny petty things that's like I probably shouldn't have done, but because I'm like
the same way I've done it before too.
Yeah. And I like spent so much time on it, re-rendering it. My computer's like 10 years old, so it takes like 2 days.
Same.
I uploaded it, and I actually uploaded the wrong one, and it had already, like, the link was already out there. You can't, because YouTube is weird or whatever. They don't let you change the video. It's done. So the version that's up is the one is like the broken bad one that I didn't want to upload. And I think that experience sort of made me think like, well, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care.
Yeah, that'll definitely do
I'm just gonna. It just felt like when I saw that I'd uploaded and I realized I uploaded the wrong one, my soul left my body, and now I'm just hollowed. So like that's fine.
Yeah, I always have that fear with that stuff. I'll put something out there and there will be some like horrible bug with it. I'm very. I feel like we're probably the same in that way, in which like so the way I put my stuff together is I'll end up watching my video like 4 or 5 times before I upload it. I watch it over and over and over again because I have a horrible OCD worm brain, and so like I'm obsessed with like I need to have it look the way I want it to look, and I want it to sound as good as it can for the most part. Audio mixing is hard. I try. But the visuals are definitely something that I care about, and like I'll notice something is skipping in like some specific area and it'll annoy the hell out of me or whatever, and I'll hyper focus on it. But yeah, I've run into that where I've exported the video, waited like an entire day for it to export. I watch it again before I upload it to YouTube, and then it's like I notice one thing and I'm like, all right, I guess I have to go and export it the second time.
Yeah, like people say like, oh, I'm becoming the Joker about this. Like, I don't think they fully realize how jokeified making a video.
I frequently, whenever there's something like that, I frequently referred to myself as getting Joker-fied. It's become a go-to for me as a phrase at this point. But yeah. When you're making a video is like
straight past like thing. Anger. You just go past anger, past frustration, and just into like this like seething despair.
Your soul like just sort of evaporates, and you can kind of feel your will to live being dried up for a second. It's a horrible feeling. I don't recommend it for anybody, but yeah, no, I definitely. I totally understand that, like, being afraid or, worrying initially when putting out a video for the first time. My first few were like that, and I think I've gotten used to it, but every single time I put one out, I still have that, like, that nagging feeling of, like, what if it's bad? What if nobody likes it? What if it unveils me for the fraud that I am? The normal creative shit that goes on whenever you put something out there in the world. But it's always funny because every time it's met with, oh, this is really good, and like I'll have this like maybe I'll notice something that I kept in and forgot to take out, and like I'll notice it, but nobody else will. So it just goes to show that like nobody else gives a shit to the degree that I do.
Yeah, no one cares. No one cares. I'm almost positive that like people look at this video and go, oh, hour and 10 minutes, cool. I'll just put it on a second monitor and I won't even look at it while I listen to it.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a thing a lot of people do these days, which I don't recommend doing for your videos or mine, because we're both the type who really like to do the visual stuff. That's like the bread and butter.
I do it because I like to.
Oh yeah, that the entire reason I do
the visuals fun. Because I get. Yeah, I like absolutely. That's the fun part for me, like fucking around like weird like generative stuff like glitch art and that sort of thing. Like I spent a lot of time like something that I want to do for each video is to have a kind of unique aesthetic presence, that's to a degree kind of inspired by the show and the culture around the thing that I'm doing. Yeah. So the show Serial Experiments Lane was made on like old Mac computers. So I've got like the old Mac QuickTime player that pops up for like videos, and like the little my little quotations appear in a little Mac notes like app thing, and I've got like the I didn't realize that like I actually, when I was making this, I had no idea that you were doing the same thing where you like grab old like TV ads for interstitial things.
Yeah, that's I noticed.
So I think we both like locked onto the same vibe there.
Yeah, I'm somebody who really likes the little visuals. I love the editing in your video in particular. It's one of the things that fascinated me, which is part of why I was like earlier, you know, interested in how you kind of got your style, because I know for me it's like a mixture of I like that look, I like that vibe, and then I wanted to make something that was like, you know, unique and not derivative of just like, you know, slapping on a filter and just being like it's 80s or whatever. We're doing the typical bright neon type of thing. Instead I distinctly want my videos to feel like you found them in a like a old box in some basement in a stack of VHS tapes. That's the end goal. I've legitimately gotten to the point,
like in between some like employee training video for like Best Buy or something. Like, where did you get this tape? Like
that's the end goal. I've gone so far as to like I'm looking into the process of like getting a VHS, getting like a cassette recorder basically, and essentially putting everything through that first and then pulling it off again to give it an even more sort of authentic look to that, because it's I don't want to just do the. I feel like there's a lot of people who just kind of will take that sort of styling and you know, they'll do the Big Mac's over here crying, but yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people that will sort of take the aesthetic of like I guess kind of retro. I wouldn't say either of us are particularly like just kind of trying to be 80s or whatever, quote unquote. But I feel like there are a lot of people who go like the easy route with that stuff, and I don't know, I put a lot of time into my stuff, and I noticed in particular with your work that a lot of your like visual stuff is that same sort of very intricate stuff that I personally like putting in my video, which I think is kind of the reason I was like so drawn to it. Because as a debut video, it's like really goddamn impressive. It took me a while to finally like get a style to where I'm happy. So the fact that you were able to kind of pull that out right away is fairly impressive, you know.
Well, thanks. I think it comes from like I think I had a bit of a leg up having worked in like games before, right? So I having sort of like experience with trying to and my partner is an artist, works in the games industry as well, and spends quite a bit of time trying to like convey the crux of all art, right? Like trying to convey emotion through a medium. Like trying to get your vision across, like trying to get what you have in your head and get it onto the screen. And that's something that I've sort of, like, having worked in games and working with my partner, and my partner being a visual artist as well. Like that's something that I've got a lot of experience with working with. Actually coming up with the ideas, I think it comes from like I think it comes from following a lot of artists and having a wide and varied set of interests, right? Like there's the main driver, I think, for some of the late stuff is like I knew I needed to mangle clips from the show so that I could get them past content ID.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern I've had, because I've thought about covering anime, and the way you did it in particular, I really liked how you did it.
Yeah, so in that case, I was like, well, the show, and this is why I sort of say I want to draw visual, sort of unique visuals from the era that the show's representing, or the era the show was created, or the show itself, that sort of thing. And I knew that, okay, I know that a lot of serial experiments lame is created on old Mac computers, and that's something I'm familiar with. I'll pull that through. But then also kind of applying a little bit of a glitch art aesthetic, and a little bit of that sort of Y2K type stuff as well. There's a visual artist whose name I'm completely blanking on right now, called Data Erase. I'm totally blanking on the name. Hopefully I can one sec. I know I can find this name. I will.
Yeah, we can
cut this.
Cut it out.
No, I was right the first time. It's Data Erase. So they're an anime glitch artist, like a digital glitch artist, and it's very you can see the forms of, in their work, you can see the forms of anime characters, but it's just all pixel sorted, glitched, sprite blocks, all sorts of stuff, right? And it's about knowing the kind of knowing the techniques you can use to get that effect, knowing the I don't know, it's I guess it's knowing, digging into what makes that stuff happen and what makes that art look the way it does, so that potentially you can even do it yourself, right? If your style is say, for example, I really love Missing No, right? From Pokemon, right? I really love those glitched Pokemon sprites, right? Well, if you learn how to glitch Pokemon sprites, then you can generate a bunch of this stuff yourself, and you can kind of get an understanding of what's happening and run your own art through it, or run entire clips from the show through a similar process that replicates that, and you can get around content ID when you do it.
Yeah. That's definitely, I feel like that's kind of sort of how my style has come to be. I've sort of just, I do what I think looks cool, and then, I'll see some random piece of art or some video by somebody else, and I'll see a specific thing that's oh, that's a particularly cool effect. How do I replicate that effect? Or stuff like that. You kind of just sort of find things over the years and sort of incorporate that into your own style is sort of how I've done it, at least. But that sounds...
I think the key thing is step out of your comfort zone and step out of what you're familiar with, and start reading books, watching films, watching different TV shows, playing different games, looking at artists from different eras. Start checking, doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do, stuff that's you're not really exposed to that often. Go to a modern art gallery, right? It's easy to say it's kind of cringe to what is this art stuff, modern art, but just go check it out. People doing some wild stuff, and oftentimes they will sort of say in their artist statement kind of hey, this is what I'm inspired by, this is what I'm sort of referencing with this piece, and it starts leading you down a little rabbit hole of weird stuff to look at.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I guess before we wrap up then, just one of the last things I wanted to that I want to ask while I have you here, do you have anything you've been watching recently? Any recommendations for the good audience we have here? Watching or playing things, or just maybe even reading. Maybe we'll introduce some literature to the goblin-brained people that follow me.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm sure some of them can read, at least.
There's an author that I quite enjoy. called China Mieville. They wrote there's two books that I would recommend. Actually, no, sorry, scratch that. One book. The second book is two. For a first China Mieville book, you would bounce off it. The first book I would recommend is a book called Kraken. It's one of my favorite books. It is. It's about someone who works in a museum preserving animals, and they preserve this giant squid, Kraken, right? One day they rock up to work, and the squid is missing. It's gone. It's completely vanished. And it's this exploration of cults, of religion, of the spaces that we inhabit, of folklores and beliefs, and it's a really incredible book. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. What was the name one more time?
Kraken by China Mieville. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I just want to make sure we get that said. But all right. Okay. So, aside from that, then I think you already mentioned it earlier. But are there any other upcoming projects you wanted to use besides that one you already did?
Well, I'll just recap it. Yeah. So, if people want to watch this show, you can watch it. It's only 6 episodes. It's called X Driver. EX Driver. It's a weird, weird little OVA that, like, I don't really think got picked. There was two films that they did afterwards. I'm not really going to cover them though. But this show is like, I think it's just fascinating. It's this strange kind of, it's this strange little package that ultimately, like, it's not great. It's not like amazing, but it's got a lot of heart, I think, and it's got like it's got some amazing, like, actual, like, vehicles and some drifting and stuff that's pretty sick. Yeah, check that show out, and I'm gonna have a video out about it, hopefully in the next month or two.
Oh, really? Well, hey, that's nice to hear it's coming up that soon, because yeah, there's a lot of work from what it sounds like and looks like, at least with that Lane one. But yeah, I mean, I'm always down for anime.
It's definitely
like
gonna nowhere. It's nowhere as long. It's nowhere as long. This is I'm aiming for
totally
shorter
fair,
one.
especially if you have to score everything. But yeah, no, that series, that sounds very interesting. It reminds me of Blue Submarine. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but that's another one that's a particularly, like, weird 6-episode OVA type series that is just a bizarre amalgamation of, like, really horrific 3D animation and 2D stuff, but it ends up being a really good show.
Blue Submarine.
Blue Submarine number 5 is the full name. It's
okay. I'll put that on my list.
It's worth looking into, but it is a very flawed show that what you mentioned reminded me of, just because it has that same sort of, it's like a weird OVA that, like, nobody really picked up on the radar, and it's not the best, but it's got a lot of interesting concepts and ideas, you know, and that's like the kind of media that personally I like the most. So yeah, I'm probably definitely gonna check that out as well on my end. But
that's honestly, that's truly, like, what could you ask for? Like, why would you want to watch, like, perfect, amazing stuff when you can watch, like, interesting things that are reaching for, like, something maybe they don't quite get there and they're not really sure of themselves? That's fascinating to me. That's interesting. I love that.
That's more or less everything I think I cover, because I just find stuff that's flawed far more interesting a lot of the time, because it's like, often it's overlooked, and often, you know, there's a really good concept or really good ideas there, but they're just not noticed because they're not, like, something people have seen, or maybe the idea didn't fully land. And I think that's just a very interesting area to be in. So I definitely look forward to that, if that's some more of the stuff, if that's the stuff that interests you, and that's the stuff that, like, you'll probably talk about going forward. Hell yeah. But before we go, I do want to give you a chance here. Where can people find you so that they can actually go watch some of this great content coming up?
You can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/isyourguy, ISYOURGUY. That's where you'll find my link to my YouTube channel. You can check that out and do the thumbs up thing and go link to my Bandcamp and check out the soundtrack that I did for the Lane video and stuff. And that's where all the other soundtracks will be when I eventually make them.
All right. That's definitely recommend checking him out. Again, Isyourguy, one of my favorite up and coming creators, I think, genuinely. I really liked your Lane video, and I'm very excited about what you have next coming for us. But thank you so much for sitting down with me today and chatting and just talking about some behind the scenes stuff with us here on Beyond the Wires. Hopefully you audience members will join us next time as I talk to another creator, most likely, though who knows when that will be. Until then, have a good night and stay safe out there, gamers.